We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Hello there, it's 6 o'clock. I'm Michelle Dewberry and this is Dewbs & Co, the show where we'll get into the stories that have got you talking today. I mean, what a day it's been. It's been filled with embarrassing climb downs from the government, hasn't it? Owen Paterson, the MP at the centre of the row about paid lobbying, has today resigned. Was he right to do so? And a new treatment has been unveiled for COVID. It's been called a game changer. Is it? And Yorkshire County Cricket Club has been called institutionally racist. Is it? But first, the news headlines.
Michelle, thank you. I'm Polly Middlehurst and these are your latest GB News headlines. An MP who threatened to throw acid at another woman has avoided jail. A warning the video we're about to show does contain flashing images. Claudia Webb was handed a 10-week term suspended for 2 years for harassing Michelle Merritt. She was also given 200 hours community service. The Chief Magistrate described her behaviour as callous and intimidatory. Webb says she plans to appeal. The Prime Minister says he's very sad to hear that Owen Paterson, who he described as a friend and colleague for decades, will resign as the MP for North Shropshire. The former Tory Cabinet Minister, who faced suspension for breaching lobbying rules, said in a statement, "The last 2 years have been an indescribable nightmare for my family and me. I will remain a public servant," he said, but outside the cruel world of politics. And the announcement came after the government decided to hold a second vote on parliamentary disciplinary procedures. Thousands of care home staff could lose their jobs next week because they aren't fully vaccinated against COVID. NHS data shows that over 49,000 workers, that's around 1 in 10, have still not received 2 COVID vaccinations. The government has made it mandatory for employees in registered care homes in England to have both jabs. The first pill designed to treat coronavirus has been approved by the UK medicines regulator. The tablet will be given to patients recently diagnosed with COVID and those who may be vulnerable to illnesses like diabetes or heart disease. In clinical trials, the drug, developed by a US company, cut the risk of hospitalisation and death. Cervical cancer rates are almost 90% lower in women who had the HPV vaccine as children. A study published in The Lancet found that those in their 20s who'd had the dose between the ages of 12 and 13 were far less likely to develop the disease in adulthood compared with those who were unvaccinated. Cancer Research UK described the findings as no less than historic. More than 40 countries, including the United Kingdom, have pledged to quit using coal, the single biggest contributor to climate change. The commitments were made during the COP26 summit in Glasgow, following a UK-led coal-to-clean power transition plan. Countries including Poland, Vietnam and Chile have all vowed to phase out coal power in the 2030s. Poorer nations will have until the 2040s. However, Australia, India, China and the United States, some of the largest consumers of coal, did not sign up to the pledge. But COP26 President Alok Sharma remains optimistic.
I do believe that the end of coal is in sight. I do believe we're getting to a point where we consign coal power to history. A brighter future comes ever closer, a future of cleaner air, cheaper power and good green jobs.
Police in Western Australia have charged a 36-year-old man in connection with the abduction of 4-year-old Cleo Smith. She was taken from her family's tent on a campsite more than 2 weeks ago and was found in a house just yesterday morning. Police have also released their recording of the moment she was discovered.
I got you, Bobby. What's your name? You're alright. What's your name? What's your name, sweetheart?
My name is Cleo.
Your name is Cleo.
Hello, Cleo.
A bird flu prevention zone has been declared across Britain after a rise in detection of the disease. It'll now be a legal requirement for all bird keepers to follow strict biosecurity measures to help protect their flocks. The chief veterinary officers of England, Wales and Scotland say the actions must be taken now to prevent the flu spreading further to other poultry and domestic birds. Officials say the risk to the public is very low. That's all from me. I'm back in an hour now. Let's get back to Dewbs & Co.
Thanks for that, Polly. Oh, I just love that footage of Cleo when she says, "My name's Cleo." You can just, honestly, it pulls at the heartstrings, doesn't it? So pleased that story had a happy ending. Anyway, with me tonight until 7 o'clock, economist Vicky Price, barrister Samantha Davies and Jake Wallace-Simon, the deputy editor of the Jewish Chronicle. You know the drill by now. I also want to know what is on your mind. If it matters to you, it matters to me. You can get in touch on email gbviews@gbnews.uk. You can tweet me at Michelle Dewbs or at GBNews. I want all your opinions on everything that's going on tonight, everything that we're talking about. And if I've missed something that's got you going today, get in touch and let me know about that as well. And speaking of today, the Tory party failed a basic life test. If you're going to flex your muscles, do you have the courage to see it through? Because I refer, of course, to the ridiculous debacle in Parliament yesterday when, rather than just voting on the sanctions that should have been applied to Owen Paterson, the MP was found to have acted as a paid lobbyist, they decided instead, of course, to change the rules of the game. Why? Well, because clearly they thought they could, and so they did, pushing a three-line whip as they went. Alas, I've got to say, when they saw the aftermath of all of this, which included Labour and the SNP refusing to join their new standards committee, and even the Daily Mail turning against them, they quickly changed their mind. Thus, the amendment was basically scrapped, leaving Owen Paterson due to face a vote again on his sanctions. And so he resigned. I think you literally couldn't make this stuff up sometimes, could you? But I've got to ask, what on earth were they thinking? And was Owen Paterson right to resign? Your thoughts?
I'm not sure he had much of a choice, to be honest. I mean, that statement that he released about the pressure on him and his family showed that he was under a great deal of distress over this period. But you're right in pointing out that this really is about Tory mishandling, not just of their own party, but it's totally misreading the entire mood. And it does seem to fit a pattern with Boris Johnson to me that, you know, we've seen it before, that he stands by his ministers, stands by his men, normally, until he doesn't.
When you say that, I'm singing it in my own head,
sorry,
that Stand By Your Man song.
I didn't mean to do that for you.
No, you don't want me to sing it out loud either.
Well, I'm about to mention Matt Hancock, which might make it even worse. But, you know, he stood by Matt Hancock until he didn't. He stood by Dominic Raab with the Afghan debacle until he didn't, and he's done it again. And he's really picking massive hills to die on and then dying on them, which isn't really a good look for the Tories.
Yeah, Samantha, I'm really interested. You're a barrister. A lot of all that was going on yesterday, which, by the way, if you want to have a problem with the standards and how the process is, that's not a problem in itself, but to me it was all about the conflation of the issues. But they seem to be yesterday, the issue was all around the fairness, how people are dealt with in other workplaces, the right to appeals, etc. In your mind as a barrister, did you look at that process and think, oh, alarm bells, that was an unfair process?
I didn't think so, actually. Because, in fact, one of the issues that Owen Paterson raised was the question of natural justice and sort of a foundational principle of our justice system, audi alteram partem, so a chance to hear the other side. He was saying that the Standards Committee had not listened to or had given him an opportunity to put forward witnesses. And in fact, when you look at the issues, 14 of the approaches that were found to breach parliamentary standards were in fact via email and letter. So the question then is, what did he want these witnesses to say?
But those witnesses had already submitted written statements.
Precisely.
And there was no request for them to be orally met, apparently, at the time.
But there's another point, in addition to that. The reason the witnesses were not required was because, in fact, the Commissioner considered that any contribution they had was irrelevant to the issues, which was, did he breach the parliamentary standards? And it was a very narrow question. Did he lobby on behalf of a party by whom he was paid? And the answer to that question was quite simple.
And then the second thing, before I bring Vicky in as well, I'm just keen to understand your view on the process, because what you're saying is quite right. This sentence of natural justice, it seems to be, you know, politicians get sound bites, they swallow them and they just regurgitate them all the time. That sentence, if I had £1 for every time I'd heard that in the last 48 hours, I'd be minted. They keep repeating that sentence. Yeah. And the second part of it was about the appeals. They were saying that there wasn't a fair appeal process. Do you agree with that?
I don't think that's true, actually, because, in fact, the point is the sanction is ultimately voted on by MPs, and I'm not entirely sure about the process, but, in fact, I think if you're not happy with that vote, there is an opportunity for further hearing within the parliamentary system. So, in fact, he did have a form of appeal. Of course, it's not by way of complete rehearing, yes, which exists in other regulatory areas, where someone faces professional discipline, but he did have an opportunity for further consideration of the issue. So it's not the case that there was no appeal. It was simply, if I may say in this case, that the party did not like the conclusion met by the process which has existed for eons, and they sought to change it to help one of their mates.
Yeah, and Vicky, I've got to say, you watch it, and I almost want to ask, well, what were they thinking? But I know what they were thinking. They were thinking, well, you know, we are in power, we're the majority, we can do this, so we will do this. And I can kind of get that to some extent. I don't agree with it, but I can understand it. But then, if that's what you're going to do, why not have the, I want to use a word that I can't use before tea time, but why not have the courage to stick to it then? Why, the second that you've seen the response and the reaction in the press, which is one of their driving factors, I'm sure, why have they climbed down?
I think you're quite right that they can look at the way in which Parliament works, the way in which this committee has been working at various stages. I mean, after all, they're looking, we're here, to change the laws so that they can have elections earlier rather than the 5-year Parliament Act. So they are right to, at some point, look at how it all works, because the Standards Committee is quite new, relatively new. So it's been around, of course, for a couple of decades, but it's not part of the very original way in which Parliament was working, so they can look at that. But to look at this with a retrospective decision, in other words, to try and hit it now when they've already made a decision, rather than say, all right, we accept this, let's look at it for the future. That might have been, a legitimate way forward.
Yeah.
So the reason why, of course, they now can't go ahead with it, and of course Owen Paterson has resigned in any case, is because even their own party was not happy with it. Yeah. And that's what happened. Loads of Tories voted against or abstained. They had all been pushed to...
Yeah, three-lined,
yes,
wasn't it?
Exactly. And I think that is the reason why they backed down. So, and of course, the result is pretty bad, I think, for Boris Johnson.
Yeah, and Ministerial Aide Angela Richardson, she was basically fired for abstaining from the vote yesterday, and then was given a job back today. This is what I'm saying when I say you can't make this stuff up. And this is why I sit there and I think, do you know what? This is such a tricky time in politics, and you should be trying to. Boris Johnson should be trying to build trust. He should be trying to make sure that people want to re-elect and reappoint his government. So to me, this is such an earned goal because it's so silly. Because if that's what, and this is the point that I can't seem to get beyond in my own mind, if that's what you wanted to do, and I don't agree with it, but if that's what you wanted to do, then to not have the courage to see it through, all you've done is just created an absolute mess, and I've got no sympathy for it because it's a mess of your own making.
Yeah.
And part of the problem is that, for years we haven't seen the words Tory and sleaze connected in any serious way. I mean, it used to be the case they were almost synonymous, but that sort of faded away, hasn't it, over time? And now it feels like we're going back to a time when the two just felt like the same thing. And Boris has sort of brought that spectre back to life in a way. And now look at the headlines. It could have been from the 80s.
Yeah, and that's why I raised the point about the Mail as well, because even the Daily Mail, which some might say would be leaning towards supporting the Tories on a normal day, even they were quite brutal. I've just flashed up their front pages there. And also, by the way, sticking with politics but diverting slightly, Claudia Webb, of course, we've had that verdict today as well. So I think all in all, she got a 10-week jail sentence, suspended for 2 years, 200 hours community service as well. So I think all in all, it's just been a bad day for politics at a time where we need to be bringing people closer to politics, closer to politicians and building that integrity and trust. I want to know your thoughts on all of this. Of course, the outcome of this will be another by-election. So we'll have to wait and see when that gets called, because I know there's another two that haven't had their dates yet set. So you've got obviously the David Amis, that seat there, which other parties have said that they won't contest. And then you've got Bexley and Sidcup as well, which is the former Minister James Brookensshire, who of course recently died of cancer. So that's 3 by-elections coming up, so it's going to be interesting times for sure. Let me just have a look. You guys have been contacting. I always wonder, what are you going to say? Are you going to surprise me? I wonder, is there anyone in defence of what the government did? Is there anyone out there that says, actually, this was a good thing? I suspect that there isn't. I'm seeking to find it nonetheless. Chuck has been in touch saying he should have been held to account on the standards at the time of his breaking them and not at this new changed standards. That's exactly the point that Vicky was trying to make there. You don't just change the rules in the middle of a game but then kind of retrospectively try and put them on. John has also said, no, he should have served his suspension like an adult. So no, he shouldn't have resigned, John's saying. He should have served his suspension like an adult and stayed as the MP his constituency voted for. He's just proved what many suspected all along, and that these people are only interested in themselves. John goes on to say it's pathetic. Not mincing your words there, John. And of course, it's worth saying that Owen was the MP, I think it was about 24 years, nearly quarter of a century. That's an incredibly long time. And if you are one of his constituents, by the way, do get in touch, because I'd be intrigued to see what you think about this, because by all accounts, he was a very well-liked MP and quite a respected one up until a lot of this stuff. So if you're one of them, get in touch and let me know. I'm going to take a quick break. And coming up, the UK's medicines regulator has approved a COVID pill for the vulnerable. Is it a game changer? And I've promised myself, by the way, a glass of wine when I get home if I manage to pronounce the name of this pill right. So we shall see if I pass my own test after the break.
On Brazier at 8, the Edinburgh School asking boys to wear a skirt in the interest of gender equality. Also, hi there, it's the Duchess of Sussex. Why is Meghan Markle cold-calling politicians in America? And just when you thought North Korea couldn't get any madder, Kim Jong-un bans any mention of Dad. That's Brazier from 8.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Welcome back. Now, some good news. The first pill designed to treat symptomatic COVID has been approved by the UK's medicines regulator. The tablet, are you ready for this? Molnupiravir. I did it! Molnupiravir will be given twice a day to vulnerable patients recently diagnosed with the virus. In clinical trials, the pill, which was originally developed to treat the flu, cut the risk of hospitalisation or death by nearly half. Health Secretary Sajid Javid said the treatment was a game changer. And for the most frail and immunosuppressed, see, I start my pronunciations well and it tails off. Anyway, the UK is now the first country in the world to approve an antiviral pill that can be taken at home for COVID. So what do we think to this? Is this indeed the game changer that we are being promised that it is? Samantha?
I don't think it is a game changer because there are some restrictions on who it's open to. So, of course, certainly for the immunosuppressed, it does represent a big change and a very positive change, yes? But in terms of the wider population, they have to have at least one high-risk factor which makes them a possible beneficiary of this pill. And if they don't, so if you're not over 60 or otherwise considered vulnerable...
Like obese, heart disease,
then
diabetes.
You don't qualify. And so you're really then... It's business as usual, I would say, for the majority of the population. But still, I mean, I'm not going to not celebrate an advance in, you know, medical practice and antiviral treatment. Of course, that's a positive thing, but it's not a game changer. We still need to be looking at the other things we're doing in terms of managing the current situation. So that's my view.
Your view?
I'm a bit more optimistic, actually, because the reason why it's restricted is because of price, as I understand it. Okay. So they're going to just make sure that it goes to the ones who are most vulnerable, which makes sense if it is expensive. But what one forgets in this calculation, and I really hope that they're going to do this pretty quickly, is look at the cost-benefit. Because if you limit that way, the number of people who go, or you reduce because of that, the number of people who end up going to hospital, the NHS costs get reduced very significantly, and then there are all these other ongoing costs that are there if someone takes over a bed that perhaps, you know, somebody with cancer should have been occupying, etc., plus all the concerns that you've got around you in terms of giving it to others and so on. You can be at home, you can take that medicine, so I think it's great, and I think it's the beginning. There are going to be loads more. I think that's going to make such a big difference to the way in which we view it. And we do need to think that, you know, we can get over it, not just with being vaccinated, but also that whoever gets it can actually get a pill, like with flu, and get better without putting any extra strain on NHS resources.
Jack?
Well, I think it could contribute towards being a game changer. I mean, it's an incremental benefit, and it forms another part of the pincer. If the first part is vaccines, the second part is this pill, and between the two of them, they should be able to reduce hospitalisation and death really, really significantly. And I think it's a real point of celebration that the UK approved it so quickly. I think that Boris...
Does it concern you? Do you have any concern about being the world's first country to do this? Do you think, oh, well, does that mean it's safe or not?
No, I don't, because don't forget, this is a pill that's been deemed safe before for flu, so it's not an entirely new product. Now it's been tested for COVID and it's looking promising. But I think it's important to look at examples of countries that have done this sort of thing really well, i.e. Israel. You know, Boris and Naftali Bennett, the new Israeli Prime Minister, are quite close friends. They had a good chat at COP26, and one of the things that he wanted to learn from him was how to crush COVID without a lockdown. And one of the things that Israel did was to approve the booster shot before the FDA had given its stamp of approval.
Aren't they
and it
even in
seems to
talks
have
about
worked
a
out
fourth
well.
one in Israel? Am I?
Well, they're ahead of the curve, unfortunately, in terms of COVID waves, and what's hitting them one day hits us the next. But I think that the real fear in all of this, and the kind of problem that the government is going to face, is that if this makes more headlines, and if people become aware that you've got a pill that can reduce or even cure COVID, to put it in a crude sense, people may be encouraged not to take the vaccine quite so much. And that's a real sort of PR wrangle for the government to deal with, that you want to have people taking the vaccine and taking the pill. But the PR could go wrong, and then it could warp the whole playing field again.
Yeah, and I think if you're like really clinically vulnerable or in the high risk group, then of course this can only be. If you're sitting there and you're like, I don't know, you've got whatever problems that make you really in the high risk category, then anything that you can do, that you can take, that you can have, anything is going to help you. So I guess I've got no problem with it being restricted to some extent. I do wonder, and I'll get criticised for this, but I do wonder when it says here they're talking about people that have got one risk factor, for example, obesity. So we know that if you're obese, it puts you at a significantly higher risk of, you know, serious consequences of COVID than if you're not obese. And I wonder how many people actually have used COVID as a wake-up call to assess their own personal health and make changes for themselves to their own personal health, because
Lose weight, you're saying?
Yeah, I am saying that, but not just lose weight, by the way, because one of the types of diabetes are around lifestyle and things like that. So it's not just a weight thing. The obesity one obviously is. But I just wonder if there are as many people out there that have actually used this as a, you know, I value my health.
It's much easier to take a pill, isn't it, than to lose weight?
Yes, but we mustn't exaggerate that, because, of course, if you look at obesity, there are loads of social factors that are linked to it. So almost, if you like, the poorer you are, the more likely it is that you'll be obese. So we've got
but
to
there's
be
a direct
careful.
correlation between how much you eat and how much you move.
No.
Is
But
your size,
isn't
it?
the question, in terms of what you're saying, going back to the NHS, in terms of what is the NHS and what are our government services doing to help people with other contributing factors? So, for example, I listened to a very interesting programme yesterday about people with cholesterol and being part of a study and being identified as having high cholesterol and then being helped to take action to reduce their cholesterol. But that was done through their GP. So I think you're sort of saying, well, what are individuals doing? I think it comes back slightly, though, to the government and the NHS. What is it doing to help to encourage people to look at their other health issues and how they can deal with them?
I feel uncomfortable about all this, really, because personal responsibility is getting lost in all this.
Yeah,
looking at factors, looking at the government, it's everyone's fault but the person who's eating too much.
No,
I
didn't say that. I think you should have listened to what I said. I didn't say that. I just said, what is the government or what are GPs doing to help those people?
Well, if you listened to what I said, I wasn't denying that the government has a role, but I think that the role of personal responsibility can get lost when we're pointing at external factors that influence someone's lifestyle, like the government, like the NHS, like income levels and so forth. People still have a choice about what they do, and to deny that is to patronise them, frankly.
I don't think that's true. If we go back to Vicky's point about income, if people are very poor and cannot afford to eat high-quality food, I don't understand what choice you're saying they have.
Well, hold on, because I was from a very poor family. I'm one of 6, actually, and my mum never had much money, but what my mum did is cook food. So I don't really always buy this argument that if you're poor, you have to eat a load of rubbish. It doesn't really wash with me, because we was poor, were poor, people will correct my grammar, and we didn't eat, we didn't rush out buying McDonald's and this, that and the other. We had basic food.
Cheaper than buying McDonald's, so home cooking doesn't bring the price of your living up, it brings it down. So it really isn't the case.
Yes, but lots of people don't actually have the information that they need.
Come on, it's Google.
There's a lot of that.
Google can give you what you need.
But there are loads of other families, of course, which were like yours, and you're a living example of good eating, obviously.
Thank you. Are you trying to sound slim? But I'm a good example of a parent that didn't have any money, and instead of doing what would be easy to do, I'm an example of someone that had a parent that took the time to make sure that they knew how to cut. You can get information for free off Google 24/7. I just don't really have much time for excuses about why people can't take responsibility for their own health. Of course, if you're ill and you're obese for that reason, then that's very different. Anyway, we've gone off on a tangent. James Smith says it's very awkward watching this show with guests leaning along a straight table. Can't you get a curved table, James? We just had this conversation before we came on air. I've put it on my Christmas list. Hopefully people will listen and I might get it. Helen has just been in touch now saying, I was in Aldi last week and carrots were 29 pence a bag. She says, what else can I say when it comes to health? Lots of you getting in touch about Patrick here saying, hang on, when it comes to COVID vaccines were supposed to be the game changer. Why is everything supposedly the game changer? Well, anything that works, I guess, and gets us out of the situation that we're in, the better. Anyway, let's move on. The Bank of England has surprised many by leaving interest rates on hold at 0.1% for at least another month. However, the bank used its quarterly monetary policy report to signal that it was likely to increase borrowing costs in the coming months. The decision pushed the pound lower than more than a cent against the US dollar, since many investors had been expecting the bank to increase the rate to 0.25% this month. Was holding the rate the right decision or not? Vicky, you are an economist. What a treat to have you here. What a coincidence on this day. Your thoughts?
I think they were right to keep interest rates where they are. I mean, yes, we have had an increase in inflation and it's likely to go up higher, but a lot of that is caused by external factors, not necessarily from anything that's happening here, even though obviously there's been an increase in demand for all sorts of goods right now. But it is basically the result of supply not being able to respond very quickly. And what is the point of raising interest rates in that environment? It doesn't do anything very much at all. It just makes life even more costly than would otherwise be the case. And of course, people already have to deal with higher inflation for anything they buy, excepting, of course, the 29p carrots that you mentioned earlier. But
there might be an Aldi special buy. If you're not familiar with Aldi, they do special buys, you know.
You've also got the increase in taxes, which is coming up. So the expectation is that disposable incomes are going to be going down next year, and they're going to be down for a while. They won't get back to any normality for another year and a half. And if that's the case, then what is the point of raising interest rates, which will make mortgage payments more expensive and also make it more expensive for businesses to borrow?
Yeah, I've got to say that when I was looking at the minutes, just before I move on, there was some interesting thing there. Basically, what they were saying, to exactly your point, they were suggesting that this higher inflation may even be transitionary, which is going to lead to a one-off increase in consumer prices rather than persistently higher inflation rates, which is exactly the point that you're making there, isn't it?
Yes. Well, the other interesting thing is that, of course, we have inflation of 3.1% at present. It's going to go up to 4, maybe 5%.
Their target is 2, obviously.
The target is 2, but the target is 2 for every, practically, central bank right now. And yet, here we are with the with inflation in Europe being over 4% already, with inflation in the US being over 5%, staying there for a while. And yet, the central banks there are not raising interest rates. In fact, the Fed met yesterday, the Federal Reserve Bank in the US, and left rates unchanged. And all it's done is reduced a little bit the amount of quantitative easing, which is another way in which it puts liquidity in the markets, buys bonds in the secondary market, reduces yields, interest rates a bit that way. It's going to reduce the amount it does. It's been buying something like $120 billion of bonds every month. Since February 2020. Can you imagine? And it's added that to the bank's balance sheet. It's exactly what we've been doing, but not so big. We are not doing anything for the moment. And the European Central Bank is continuing to do so as well.
Samantha, your view?
I think, well, I'm not an economist, so that's going to be the first point I make. I think, clearly, if we've got other pressures coming, as Vicky has identified, with the rise in taxes, there is clearly going to be a drop in people's disposable income. I don't see the benefit presently of raising interest rates and compounding that problem. Yeah, and I think that many people criticised the Governor of the Bank of England because of the indication he'd given that he was going to raise interest rates. And I think, well, he's the Governor of the Bank of England. We've put him in that position because we think he's qualified to make the right decisions. And so why can't we trust him?
Yeah, and while we're talking about interest rates, just before I bring you in, I'll just pop onto the screen, actually. I think there was an interesting article in The Guardian that I saw earlier. Yes, I do read The Guardian, I'll have you know. Look at this. Look at how interest rates used to be, by the way. We're sitting here and talking about 0.1, we're talking about 0.25. But look at this little chart. This is from that article there, where back in 1979, it was 17%. October 1989, it was 14.875. So here we are bouncing around at the 0.1s, talking about the 0.25s. We don't know we're born, do we?
Well, I suppose we don't. But I mean, nobody wants to go back to the 70s. Let's put it that way. In many ways, but I think that I agree with Vicky that the governor did make the right decision in not raising interest rates. And I think the reason is that we've had an unprecedented couple of years with the COVID pandemic, which has had massive economic implications. I mean, just putting X many people on furlough itself warps the economy. You had millions of people sitting at home, unable to be economically productive, unable to spend their money, creating a bit of a sort of bottleneck effect. And when they did spend their money, it was on goods rather than services, which caused supply chain problems. That was compounded by Brexit and by energy crises and all sorts of things. So it's been a perfect storm, really, which has led to this inflation. I think if the government did react by raising interest rates, then it would be so painful for consumers, because not only would we have inflation, we'd also have interest rate rises. And being caught between those two rocks is a very hard place to be indeed, and it'd be very unpleasant for people. And I think the consumer is often forgotten in these discussions.
Yeah, and as we mentioned, many of my viewers will remember we had the budget very recently. You'll remember that so many different organisations, off the back of the budget, never mind this meeting today about the base rates, the back of the budget, many companies started raising their mortgage product prices. And I think you might have been here then as well, Vicky, because we were very quick to point out that these companies are very quick, aren't they, to raise the mortgage products, but not so quick to raise the interest provided on their savings account. Make of that what you will. Anyway, we'll be discussing the racism allegations made by a former Yorkshire cricketer after the break. And have you seen the new John Lewis Christmas ad? If you have, it's caused a bit of controversy. What do you think to it?
On Tonight Live, it's Mark Dolan in for Dan Wootton. My big question guest is one of the most high-profile politicians of his generation. David Mellor served under Margaret Thatcher, was Chief Secretary to the Treasury, and has survived many a political scandal. He's live in the studio at 10. In The Clash, should we build more nuclear power stations? And in my monologue, why don't the facts seem to matter anymore when it comes to COVID? I say no jabs for kids and no Plan B COVID restrictions. But what do you think? I'll see you at 9.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Hello there, welcome back. Now, Yorkshire County Cricket Club, have you heard about this story? It's in the hot seat at the moment, to put it mildly. This is following allegations of racism from a former player, Azim Rafiq. In the last half an hour, there has been a development on this story. The club has been suspended from hosting international or major matches by the England and Wales Cricket Board. They say that until it has clearly demonstrated that it can meet the standards expected of an international venue, then ECB member and first-class county sponsors, including Yorkshire Tea and Nike as well, by the way, have ended partnerships, and a senior MP has called for the board to resign. It was reported this week that a racist term about Rafiq's Pakistani heritage was regularly used towards him, but the club's investigation concluded it was, and I quote, friendly and good-natured banter. Yesterday, former teammate Gary Balance admitted using the racial slur, and the suggestion now is that the club is institutionally racist. Is it? I wonder. Samantha, your thoughts?
Right, so I think what's really sad about this story is that it arises out of something that's happened between two people who describe themselves as close friends and having had a very, very close relationship. Is it institutionally racist? The short answer is yes, because if the club was unable to determine that the use of the word in question, we all know what the word was, I think we've all seen it reported, they could not find that term was a racial slur and found it was friendly banter. I think that beggars belief. In the 21st century, that beggars belief. And that is where the accusation of institutional racism comes from, that their board was unable to conclude, unable to sort of take a step back and assess the situation, and came to a conclusion which effectively found that...
But I thought it was an independent... I thought that the board had done an investigation and then it was passed, as per their process, to an independent body for review.
I think an independent body did the review in terms of what happened, and then the board reached its own decision in terms of the nature of the slur used.
Yeah, because there was 43 allegations that were made. I think 7 of them were upheld.
Yeah.
One of the challenges...
I think in the investigation, yeah.
Yeah, one of the challenges that I've got with this is that we haven't seen this report. We don't really know the details of what these allegations were, which ones were upheld, which ones were not upheld. But despite that, and just with the headline words, we're in a situation now where we're having a conversation about whether or not this club is institutionally racist. And I just feel a little bit, and I'm sorry, because I'm supposed to be listening to your views and I'm over-talking with my own views, so I will shut up in a second, but I just feel a little bit anxious, I guess, that before we know all of the facts about everything, we're dashing in to say this is institutionally racist. Sponsors are immediately kind of pulling out and desperate to kind of distance themselves, which I understand to some extent. But I guess it's just almost like, and you're a barrister, your entire profession is about getting the facts, doing due process and reaching the outcome.
But also, I mean, yes, but also this is about the public forum, and members of the public and sponsors are at liberty to take a decision based upon what they've heard. And for my money, if it is the case, and at the moment the club hasn't come out and said that that's not true, if it is the case that the term we are all aware of was used and was used repeatedly, and that when a complaint was raised in respect to that term being used, that complaint, on the basis of what we have heard, has effectively been dismissed. That, with the club concluding that the term was used as part of friendly banter. In my view, I was about to say in my submission, in my view, that term cannot be friendly banter.
So if two best friends, and they're best friends, I assume that you like your best friend. I base that on my own experience. But if two best friends are, I'm not going to use the banter word, you're calling each other names, because from what I've read, it was a little bit of a two-way exchange. It wasn't just one person using so-called slurs and the other one not. It was a two-way exchange that they both accepted at the time was in banter. where then does that become? Actually, no, an external person can tell these two people, actually, no, that's not banter, this is now problematic because it's racist.
Well, I think there's an issue about language, and we don't know what was said to Mr. Ballance, what, you know, in terms of his reference to him being told things that were also unacceptable. He's not told us what those things were. He could. We may find those down the line when Parliament is addressed on the issue. However, it's my view that that term cannot be friendly banter. I think there are certain lines which I think we cannot cross, and if to suggest, I think, that it could have been friendly banter, and or that perhaps it was difficult for one party to know when it became unacceptable to continue speaking in that way, I think is to completely ignore the power structures that already exist in our society and in language, and which may have impacted upon Mr. Azim Azim Rafiq feeling like he could speak up and say when, you know, whether the term was bothering him. We do have to hear more about the facts, but we've also got to think about the context. How many people are within the Yorkshire Cricket Club who might have been impacted, or who might also share racial heritage with the cricketer, who might also have that same response to that term being used about them? I think this is where the issue about nuance comes. We need to really drill down and really think about how that individual might have felt in that situation, instead of, I think, having a knee-jerk reaction and saying, this is not institutional racism, this was a conversation between friends, this is going out.
Your view, Jake?
Well, I have to say I'm itching with disagreement. It's probably a good thing for TV. But I think that, I mean, this is... I think we need to look at the context here. I mean, this is a term, don't forget, that Prince Harry, latterly reinvented as the Prince of Woke, used himself about one of his army colleagues when they were in combat. This is a term which has been used in friendly banter quite a lot over the years, and latterly it has become a hot button word, and I'm not trying to diminish the damage that it can cause in certain contexts. But look, you know, I'm Jewish. I've received my share of racial slurs in many different contexts, and my share of racism. I was Orthodox Jewish growing up and received a lot of physical threats and violence and all the rest of it. And I feel that when somebody uses any kind of term like that, or makes a joke or whatever it is that's a bit kind of close to the line, I always look for their motivation. What's our relationship? What are they trying to say? Is it just the fact that they're using a word that's been banned or been prescribed, or people are trying to ban it or trying to give it this kind of taboo nature? Or is it that they have a malicious intent? And that's what I look for. And I think the other point I would like to make is that I think that there's a real danger when we start to take these isolated instances of people using words that aren't allowed, or even being racist, and ascribing it to an institutional, systematic, underlying problem, power structures and so forth, of which you know, critical race theory is fond. I think the problem with that is that we're beginning to persuade ourselves that we live in a country and in a society that is fundamentally based on racist principles. And once that's the case, then the only solution is to re-educate ourselves, to unthink everything that we think, unconscious bias and all that. And then we lose sight of the fact that this is the best place for minorities, including Jews, that exists in the world, in the best time for minorities that's ever existed. And we should be celebrating that and recognising that we live in a hugely tolerant society where people like me can walk down the street, if I was visibly Jewish, of an evening, without any real risk in most parts of the country. I think that for all of these reasons, I really worry about the way in which this is being spun as a case of systematic institutional racism, when to me it seems like nothing of the sort.
Vicky, I'm keen to get you in as well. What's your views?
Well, it's a difficult one, really. But I understand that you know, the player in question is going to give some evidence where he's going to name loads of others, possibly some people from the board, who perhaps, you know, he felt, or at least that was a suggestion on the radio when I was listening to it earlier, that they were racially sort of against him, if you like. So it could indeed be that it's wider than just what this friend of his was saying. So we just don't know. I think we need to just wait and see. But to me, it seems, I'm a football fan, and of course there is racism there as well, and there are penalties, and indeed the odd sponsor goes. But what you need to do in each case is really deal with it quite quickly and effectively.
Yeah, it's gone on for a very long time.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to have been done properly and dealt with properly, and that's a failure really of whatever it is that they've been up to.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there
which they're paying for now.
Yeah. I mean, the only thing I would add as a latter caveat is that you're right. We don't know the facts of the case, and I'm sort of speculating on the response, the significance it's taken on in the debate. But I haven't read the report any more than anybody else, and it could end up that it was a much more serious case than has been reported. In which case, I would.
But it could end up either way, and I guess this is the point that I'm making. It could be Yorkshire County Cricket Club could be, the most systemically racist club. I don't know,
it's just
and it could not be.
But between good friends who are still good friends.
But I don't think it's the isolated incident. From what I've heard, it is one of the isolated.
43 cases, was it? 43.
43 incidents, and then 7 upheld. But as far as I understand
it's not very many.
As far as I understand it, it is a wider issue than that one conversation or the one reference that we've heard. And you say 7 is not very many. I don't think. How can you say that? Who are you to determine that 7 is not very many?
Well,
in the context of this person's experience, which you have accepted, you don't yet have the full facts on.
Well,
so I think we need.
Nobody does. I mean,
but I think we need.
One way or the other. That's really the point.
We need to sit. Yeah, we do need to sit.
I think the difficulty is using it as a punching bag for advancing an agenda on one side of the argument or the other. I mean, I think it's a mistake to sort of jump on the bandwagon and make this an issue of a sort of issue that becomes an emblem for the advancing of a woke agenda, or the alternative. And I think that we, in a way, we have our philosophical disagreements, but we do need to wait and see what the facts of the case are.
Yeah, I mean, people are not waiting and seeing, that is for sure. The sponsors, they're dropping like flies. Nike has said, Nike was the latest one, he said he would no longer be the kit supplier for Yorkshire CCC. We stand firmly against racism and discrimination of any kind. And I mean, who wouldn't? Everyone would stand firmly against racism and discrimination. There's something wrong with you if you wouldn't. I guess my point is, I just find it odd. Well, I just find it odd that it's been done, lots of this stuff has been done.
It's millions of pounds.
Before all the details are clear. Anyway, going to move on in just a second. Colin has got in contact and said, I'm very disappointed with Michelle Dewberry for joining the... it's not Colin Brazier. It's Colin from Bridgend. I won't say his surname, but it's not Brazier sitting out the back messaging me. He says, I'm very disappointed that Michelle Dewberry has joined the ill-informed media majority who have now added to Owen Paterson's misery and now his politics. He goes on to say that I should do proper background work because his so-called lobbying has saved whites. He goes on to talk about his wife and all of this being a contributing factor, and why, basically he's asking why would people like me want to add to the upset of Owen. Well, what I would respond to you, Colin, is say that, I'm sure that there was lots of good intent around the issues that Owen was making. And of course, we have a huge media in this country. So if indeed you feel that you are in receipt of information that is going to save lives, and there are huge platforms that you can use to get that knowledge out. You can leverage the media, for example. That would be a good way. And the conversation about his wife, obviously Owen himself alluded to this in the resignation statement, and it's an interesting point. Whilst it's an incredibly sad situation, which happened to his wife, I certainly wouldn't wish that onto any family. I feel a little bit uncomfortable in the way that it was brought into this debate, because I think that they are two separate issues. That's what I would say in response to you there, Colin. Lots of you have been getting in contact on lots of other stories, but before I come to that, let's have a little look at the John Lewis Christmas ad. They've released their annual Christmas advert. When I see these Christmas adverts, it's the first sign of Christmas for me. It makes me a little bit excited. This one has caused a bit of a stir from some parts online. Let's have a little look. Has anyone watched this full advert? I have. I sat and watched it. Has anyone got any strong views about it? I've got to say I didn't.
No.
But there was a lot of people online that did. There's a huge amount of people talking about it tonight. I didn't really get why.
It's not just online, if I may say so. 2 articles in the Evening Standard this evening, as I was coming over, about this. Different ones, one loving it, and the other one really attacking it.
But I thought it was all right. I didn't really see why anyone would feel so strongly to celebrate it and why anyone would feel so strongly to attack it. What am I missing?
Well, I think what people have been talking about is that they tried to cover all these issues of the moment, such as climate change, possibly, or at least the way in which we're all linked to this wider universe, and how we should embrace it and all be together and therefore care about it. And so they have, this alien who, perhaps for those who haven't seen it, I'm going to spoil it for them. So it seems that, engine failure, I think, or something of that sort, and this spacecraft with this little girl in it, Imagine. So was she allowed out by her parents on her own to go through space? But anyway, she did. Maybe she stole the car, if you see what I mean, for a quick drive, and instead fell into Earth. And then, of course, she managed to fix it amazingly herself by the love of this boy who, of course, the interesting thing for me, it has all these things around it, and it actually was quite moving. But the boy in the ad doesn't tell anything to his parents. And yet what we do know, if it comes to climate change, is that certainly, and the environment, is that the generations across all care equally, according to the surveys. So he's kept it to himself. And I thought that was interesting because it just gave quite a big, it suggested that there is a gulf between the young who worry about these things and care about these things and the older generation.
Well, I've got to say, I've never in all of my life analysed an advert to this extent ever. Patrick's got in touch and said, I'm sick of this advert already. He says it's not even Christmas. And then he goes on to say, I'm not as sick of as this one. And he goes on, he's got other adverts he's sick of as well. Well, unfortunately, Patrick, you've got a little while, actually, until Christmas. Yeah, you might have to not watch. Christine says, disgraceful about his advert because she says that white is now being represented as an alien. I really didn't see that, I have to say. Someone else has got in touch and said they're upset about it because apparently it's about someone that is non-binary, and says that I am not going to shop at John Lewis. Okay, interesting. Here we go. I think you say Elise. Is that how you pronounce your name? Elise is basically saying that the Christmas John Lewis advert is wonderful. Their advert reminds us that wherever you come from and whatever colour your skin is, you are not born with prejudice. That's a nice way to end the show, isn't it? Yes. Very nice. Yeah. I think it's Elise. I think that's your name. Lots of you as well still getting in touch on the Owen Patterson story. I think that's one that will rumble on and on. Again, I just repeat the point that I made at the beginning. Why start that process if you didn't want to see it through? Anyway, that's pretty much all we've got time for. Time flies when you're having fun. I think I managed to pronounce the name of that COVID tablet properly. I set myself a task. I think I managed it right at least once, so I've earned my glass of wine. Vicky, Samantha, Jake, thank you very much for coming in and for your company. And thank you, of course, for yours. Do get in touch if there's anything that you want me to cover that you feel like I'm missing. Drop me an email, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or tweet me at Michelle Dewbs. But that is all from me for tonight. I shall be back tomorrow, same time, 6 o'clock until 7 o'clock. You have yourselves a very good evening. In the meantime.
Hello again. A change in wind direction and therefore a change in weather during the next 24 hours. Initially clear and chilly, but then cloudier skies turn up from the north and it does turn milder as a result. We've had this cold northerly airflow during the last few days, but during the next 24 hours we replace it with more of a westerly airflow with weather fronts arriving from the Atlantic. Having said that, it's a clear and chilly evening for southern Scotland, much of England and Wales, but through the night a blanket of clouds starts to sink south across the country, lifting temperatures in the north, whilst it stays chilly and clear in the south. Frosty as we begin things in the Midlands, East Anglia, southern and southeast England, but much milder further north, 8s and 9s for much of Scotland with those cloudy skies, and some outbreaks of mainly light rain for parts of western Scotland, northwest England, West Wales as well.
For most, though, Friday's looking dry, and although it will turn cloudier in the south and east of England, we'll still see some bright spells into the afternoon, and it will feel a whole lot milder compared to recent days, 11 to 13 Celsius. We will have lost that wind chill, but we've replaced it with a lot of cloud, and that cloud sticks around for bonfire night. But during the evening, actually, most places will stay dry with relatively light winds, so it's not looking too bad for any bonfire and fireworks displays. But it does turn more unsettled towards the end of the night for northern and western Scotland, with heavier rain arriving here. And for most, it's a much milder night, temperatures staying up at 6 to 8 Celsius by and large. A bright start then across much of England and Wales for the weekend, but it turns unsettled across Scotland, Northern Ireland, and then later northwest England and North Wales. Heavy rain at times, particularly over western hills, and that strong wind reaching gale force around exposed coasts. It turns even windier on Saturday night in the far north of Scotland with some big waves. Drier further south, and a blustery day on Sunday.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedians.